I've watched through his eyes. I've listened through his ears, and I tell you, he's the one. Or at least as close as we're going to get.
That's what you said about the brother.
The brother tested out impossible. For other reasons. Nothing to do with his ability.
Yeah, well, same with the sister. And there are doubts about him. He's too malleable, too willing to submerge himself in someone else's will.
Not if the other person is his enemy.
So what do? Surround him with enemies all the time?
If we have to.
I thought you said you liked this kid.
If the buggers get him, they'll make me look like his favorite uncle.
All right. We're saving the world after all, so take him.
Audio Renaissance presents Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card.
The monitor lady smiled very nicely and tousled his hair and said, "Andrew, I suppose by now you're just absolutely sick of having that horrid monitor. Well, I have good news for you. That monitor is going to come out today. We're going to take it right out, and it won't hurt a bit." Ender nodded. It was a lie, of course, that it wouldn't hurt a bit, but since adults always said it when it was going to hurt, he could count on that statement as an accurate prediction of the future. Sometimes lies were more dependable than the truth. "So if you'll just come over here, Andrew, just sit right up here on the examining table. The doctor will be in to see you in a moment." The monitor gone. Ender tried to imagine the little device missing from the back of his neck. "Oh, I'll roll over on my back in bed and it won't be pressing there. I won't feel it tingling and taking up the heat when I shower. And Peter won't hate me anymore. I'll come home and show him that the monitor's gone, and he'll see that I didn't make it either, that I'll just be a normal kid now, like him. That won't be so bad then. He'll forgive me that I had my monitor a whole year longer than he had his. We'll be, well, not friends, probably. No, Peter was too dangerous. Peter got so angry. Brothers, though. Not enemies, not friends, but brothers. Able to live in the same house. He won't hate me, he'll just leave me alone. And when he wants to play buggers and astronauts, maybe I won't have to play. Maybe I can just go read a book. But Ender knew, even as he thought it, that Peter wouldn't leave him alone. There was something in Peter's eyes when he was in his mad mood. And whenever Ender saw that look, that glint, he knew that the one thing Peter would not do was leave him alone. "I'm practicing piano, Ender. Come turn the pages for me." "Oh, is the monitor boy too busy to help his brother? Is he too smart? Gotta go kill some buggers, astronaut?" No, I don't want your help. I can do it on my own, you little bastard, you little third." "This won't take long, Andrew," said the doctor. Ender nodded. "It's designed to be removed without infection, without damage, but there'll be some tickling, and some people say they have a feeling of something missing. You'll keep looking around for something you were looking for, but you can't find it and you can't remember what it was. So I'll tell you, it's the monitor you're looking for and it isn't there. In a few days that feeling will pass." The doctor was twisting something at the back of Ender's head. Suddenly, a pain stabbed through him like a needle, from his neck to his groin. Ender felt his back spasm, and his body arched violently backward. His head struck the bed. He could feel his legs thrashing, and his hands were clenching each other, wringing each other so tightly that they arched. "Dee Dee," shouted the doctor, "I need you." The nurse ran in, gasped. "Got to relax these muscles. Get it to me, now. What are you waiting for?" Something changed hands. Ender could not see. He lurched to one side and fell off the examining table. "Catch him!" cried the nurse. Just hold him steady. You hold him, Doctor. He's too strong for me. Not the whole thing. You'll stop his heart. Ender felt a needle enter his back just above the neck of his shirt. It burned. But wherever in him the fire spread, his muscles gradually unclenched. Now he could cry for the fear and pain of it. "Are you all right, Andrew?" the nurse asked. Andrew could not remember how to speak. They lifted him onto the table. They checked his pulse, did other things. He did not understand it all. The doctor was trembling. His voice shook as he spoke. They leave these things in the kids for 3 years. What do they expect? We could have switched him off. Do you realize that? We could have unplugged his brain for all time. "When does the drug wear off?" asked the nurse. "Keep him here for at least an hour. Watch him. If he doesn't start talking in 15 minutes, call me. Could have unplugged him forever. I don't have the brains of a bugger." He got back to Miss Pumphrey's class only 15 minutes before the closing bell. He was still a little unsteady on his feet. "Are you all right, Andrew?" asked Miss Pumphrey. He nodded. "Were you ill?" He shook his head. "You don't look well." "I'm okay." "You'd better sit down, Andrew." He started toward his seat, but stopped. Now what was I looking for? I can't think what I was looking for. "Your seat is over there," said Miss Pumphrey. He sat down, but it was something else he needed, something he had lost. I'll find it later. "Your monitor," whispered the girl behind him. Andrew shrugged. "His monitor," she whispered to the others. Andrew reached up and felt his neck. There was a Band-Aid. It was gone. He was just like everybody else now. "Washed out, Andy?" asked a boy who sat across the aisle and behind him. Couldn't think of his name. Peter? No, that was someone else. "Quiet, Mr. Stilson," said Miss Pumphrey. Stilson smirked. Miss Pumphrey talked about multiplication. Ender doodled on his desk, drawing contour maps of mountainous islands, and then telling his desk to display them in 3 dimensions from every angle. The teacher would know, of course, that he wasn't paying attention, but she wouldn't bother him. He always knew the answer, even when she thought he wasn't paying attention. In the corner of his desk, a word appeared and began marching around the perimeter of the desk. It was upside down and backward at first, but Ender knew what it said long before it reached the bottom of the desk and turned right side up. Third. Ender smiled. He was the one who had figured out how to send messages and make them march. Even as his secret enemy called him names, the method of delivery praised him. It was not his fault he was a third. It was the government's idea. They were the ones who authorized it. How else could a third like Ender have got into school? Now the monitor was gone. The experiment entitled Ender Wiggin hadn't worked out after all. If they could, he was sure they would like to rescind the waivers that had allowed him to be born at all. Didn't work, so erase the experiment. The bell rang. Everyone signed off their desks or hurriedly typed in reminders to themselves. Some were dumping lessons or data into their computers at home. A few gathered at the printers while something they wanted to show was printed out. Ender spread his hands over the child-sized keyboard near the edge of the desk and wondered what it would feel like to have hands as large as a grown-up's. They must feel so big and awkward, thick, stubby fingers and beefy palms. Of course, they had bigger keyboards, but how could their thick fingers draw a fine line the way Ender could, a thin line so precise that he could make it spiral 79 times from the center to the edge of the desk without the lines ever touching or overlapping? It gave him something to do while the teacher droned on about arithmetic. Arithmetic. Valentine had taught him arithmetic when he was 3. "Are you all right, Andrew?" "Yes, ma'am." "You'll miss the bus?" Ender nodded and got up. The other kids were gone. They would be waiting, though, the bad ones. His monitor wasn't perched on his neck, hearing what he heard and seeing what he saw. They could say what they liked. They might even hit him now. No one could see them anymore, and so no one would come to Ender's rescue. There were advantages to the monitor, and he would miss them. It was Stilson, of course. He wasn't bigger than most other kids, but he was bigger than Ender, and he had some others with him. He always did. Hey, third. Don't answer. Nothing to say. Hey, third. We're talking to you. Third. Hey, bugger lover, we're talking to you. Can't think of anything to answer. Anything I say will make it worse. So will saying nothing. Hey, third. Hey, turd. You flunked out, huh? Thought you were better than us, but you lost your little birdie, thirdie. Got a Band-Aid on your neck. Are you going to let me through? Ender asked.
Are we going to let him through? Should we let him through?
They all laughed.
Sure, we'll let you through. First, we'll let your arm through. Then your butt through. Then maybe a piece of your knee.
The others chimed in now.
Lost your birdie, 30. Lost your birdie, 30.
Stillson began pushing him with one hand. Someone behind him then pushed him toward Stillson.
Seesaw, Marjorie Daw, somebody said. Tennis, ping pong.
This would not have a happy ending. So Ender decided that he'd rather not be the unhappiest at the end. The next time Stillson's arm came out to push him, Ender grabbed at it. He missed.
Oh, gonna fight me, huh? Gonna fight me, 30?
The people behind Ender grabbed at him to hold him. Ender did not feel like laughing, but he laughed.
You mean it takes this many of you to fight 1/3? We're people, not thirds, turd face. You're about as strong as a fart.
But they let go of him. And as soon as they did, Ender kicked out high and hard, catching Stillson square in the breastbone. He dropped. It took Ender by surprise. He hadn't thought to put Stillson on the ground with one kick. It didn't occur to him that Stillson didn't take a fight like this seriously, that he wasn't prepared for a truly desperate blow. For a moment the others backed away and Stillson lay motionless. They were all wondering if he was dead. Ender, however, was trying to figure out a way to forestall vengeance, to keep them from taking him in a pack tomorrow. I have to win this now and for all time, or I'll fight it every day, and it will get worse and worse. Ender knew the unspoken rules of manly warfare, even though he was only 6. It was forbidden to strike the opponent who lay helpless on the ground. Only an animal would do that. So Ender walked to Stillson's supine body and kicked him again, viciously in the ribs. Stillson groaned and rolled away from him. Ender walked around him and kicked him again in the crotch. Stillson could not make a sound. He only doubled up, and tears streamed out of his eyes. Then Ender looked at the others coldly. You might be having some idea of ganging up on me. You could probably beat me up pretty bad, but just remember what I do to people who try to hurt me. From then on, you'd be wondering when I'd get you and how bad it would be. He kicked Stillson in the face. Blood from his nose spattered the ground nearby.
It wouldn't be this bad, Ender said. It would be worse.
He turned and walked away. Nobody followed him. He turned a corner into the corridor leading to the bus stop. He could hear the boys behind him saying, "Geez, look at him, he's wasted." Ender leaned his head against the wall of the corridor and cried until the bus came. I am just like Peter. Take my monitor away, and I am just like Peter.
All right, it's off. How's he doing?
You live inside somebody's body for a few years, you get used to it. I look at his face now, I can't tell what's going on. I'm not used to seeing his facial expressions. I'm used to feeling them.
Come on. We're not talking about psychoanalysis here. We're soldiers, not witch doctors. You just saw him beat the guts out of the leader of a gang.
He was thorough. He didn't just beat him, he beat him deep. Like Mazer Rackham at the...
Oh, spare me. So in the judgment of the committee, he passes, huh?
Mostly. Let's see what he does with his brother, now that the monitor's off.
His brother? Aren't you afraid of what his brother will do to him?
You were the one who told me that this wasn't a no-risk business.
I went back through some of the tapes. I can't help it. I like the kid. I think we're going to screw him up.
Of course we are. It's our job. We're the Wicked Witch. We promise gingerbread, but we eat the little bastards alive.
I'm sorry, Ender, Valentine whispered. She was looking at the Band-Aid on his neck. Ender touched the wall and the door closed behind him. I don't care. I'm glad it's gone. "What's gone?" Peter walked into the parlor, chewing on a mouthful of bread and peanut butter. Ender did not see Peter as the beautiful 10-year-old boy that grown-ups saw, with dark, thick, tousled hair and a face that could have belonged to Alexander the Great. Ender looked at Peter only to detect anger or boredom, the dangerous moods that almost always led to pain. Now, as Peter's eyes discovered the Band-Aid on his neck, the telltale flicker of anger appeared. Valentine saw it too. "Now he's like us," she said, trying to soothe him before he had time to strike. But Peter would not be soothed. "Like us? He keeps the little sucker till he's 6 years old. When did you lose yours? You were 3. I lost mine before I was 5. He almost made it, little bastard, little bugger." This is all right, Ender thought. Talk and talk, Peter. Talk is fine. "Well, now your guardian angels aren't watching over you," Peter said. "Now they aren't checking to see if you feel pain, listening to hear what I'm saying, seeing what I'm doing to you. How about that? How about it?" Ender shrugged. Suddenly Peter smiled and clapped his hands together in a mockery of good cheer. "Let's play buggers and astronauts," he said. "Where's Mom?" asked Valentine. "Out," said Peter. "I'm in charge." "I think I'll call Daddy." "Call away," said Peter. "You know he's never in." "I'll play," Ender said. "You be the bugger," said Peter. "Let him be the astronaut for once," Valentine said. "Keep your fat face out of it, fart mouth," said Peter. "Come on upstairs and choose your weapons." It would not be a good game, Ender knew. It was not a question of winning. When kids played in the corridors, whole troops of them, the buggers never won, and sometimes the games got mean. But here, in their flat, the game would start mean, and the bugger couldn't just go empty and quit the way buggers did in the real wars. The bugger was in it until the astronaut decided it was over. Peter opened his bottom drawer and took out the bugger mask. Mother had got upset at him when Peter bought it, but Dad pointed out that the war wouldn't go away just because you hid bugger masks and wouldn't let your kids play with make-believe laser guns. Better to play the war games and have a better chance of surviving when the buggers came again. "If I survive the games," thought Ender. He put on the mask. It closed him in like a hand pressed tight against his face. But this isn't how it feels to be a bugger, thought Ender. They don't wear this face like a mask. It is their face. On their home worlds, do the buggers put on human masks and play? And what do they call us? Slimies? Because we're so soft and oily compared to them? "Watch out, Slimy," Ender said. He could barely see Peter through the eye holes. Peter smiled at him. "Slimy, huh? Well, bugger wugger, let's see how to break that face of yours." Ender couldn't see it coming except a slight shift of Peter's weight. The mask cut out his peripheral vision. Suddenly, there was the pain and pressure of a blow to the side of his head. He lost balance, fell that way. "Don't see too well, do you, bugger?" said Peter. Ender began to take off the mask. Peter put his toe against Ender's groin. "Don't take off the mask," Peter said. Ender pulled the mask down into place, took his hands away. Peter pressed with his foot. Pain shot through Ender. He doubled up. "Lie flat, bugger. We're going to vivisect you, bugger. At long last, we've got one of you alive, and we're going to see how you work." "Peter, stop it," Ender said. "Peter, stop it. Very good, so you buggers can guess our names. You can make yourselves sound like pathetic, cute little children, so we'll love you and be nice to you, but it doesn't work. I can see you for what you really are. They meant you to be human, little third, but you're really a bugger, and now it shows." He lifted his foot, took a step, and then knelt on Ender, his knee pressing into Ender's belly just below the breastbone. He put more and more of his weight on Ender. It became hard to breathe. "I could kill you like this," Peter whispered. "Just press and press until you're dead. And I could say that I didn't know it would hurt you, that we were just playing, and they'd believe me, and everything would be fine, and you'd be dead. Everything would be fine." Ender could not speak. The breath was being forced from his lungs. Peter might mean it. Probably didn't mean it, but then he might. "I do mean it," Peter said. Whatever you think, I mean it. They only authorized you because I was so promising, but I didn't pan out. You did better. They think you're better, but I don't want a better little brother, Ender. I don't want a third." "I'll tell," Valentine said from the doorway. "No one would believe you. They'd believe me. Then you're dead too, sweet little sister." "Oh, yes," said Valentine. "They'll believe that. I didn't know it would kill Andrew, and when he was dead, I didn't know it would kill Valentine too." The pressure let up a little. "So, not today, but someday you two won't be together, and there'll be an accident." "You're all talk," Valentine said. "You don't mean any of it." "I don't?" "And do you know why you don't mean it?" Valentine asked. "Because you want to be in government someday. You want to be elected. And they won't elect you if your opponents can dig up the fact that your brother and sister both died in suspicious accidents when they were little, especially because of the letter I've put in my secret file in the city library, which will be opened in the event of my death." "Don't give me that kind of crap," Peter said. "It says I didn't die a natural death. Peter killed me, and if he hasn't already killed Andrew, he will soon. Not enough to convict you, but enough to keep you from ever getting elected." "You're his monitor now," said Peter. "You better watch him, day and night. You better be there. Ender and I aren't stupid. We scored as well as you did on everything, better on some things. We're all such wonderfully bright children. You're not the smartest, Peter, just the biggest. Oh, I know. But there'll come a day when you aren't there with him, when you forget, and suddenly you'll remember, and you'll rush to him, and there he'll be perfectly all right. And the next time you won't worry so much, and you won't come so fast, and every time he'll be all right, and you'll think that I forgot. Even though you'll remember that I said this, you'll think that I forgot, and years will pass, and then there'll be a terrible accident, and I'll find his body, and I'll cry and cry over him, and you'll remember this conversation, Valley, but you'll be ashamed of yourself for remembering, because you'll know that I changed, that it really was an accident, that it's cruel of you even to remember what I said in a childhood quarrel, except that it'll be true. I'm going to save this up, and he's going to die, and you won't do a thing, not a thing. But you go on believing that I'm just the biggest." "The biggest asshole," Valentine said. Peter leaped to his feet and started for her. She shied away. Ender pried off his mask. Peter flopped back on his bed and started to laugh. Loud, but with real mirth, tears coming to his eyes. "Oh, you guys are just super, just the biggest suckers on the planet Earth." "Now he's going to tell us it was all a joke," Valentine said. "Not a joke, a game. I can make you guys believe anything. I can make you dance around like puppets." In a phony monster voice he said, "I'm going to kill you and chop you into little pieces and put you into the garbage hole." He laughed again. "Biggest suckers in the solar system." Ender stood there watching him laugh and thought of Stilson, thought of how it felt to crunch into his body. This is who needed it. This is who should have got it. As if she could read his mind, Valentine whispered, "No, Ender." Peter suddenly rolled to the side, flipped off the bed, and got in position for a fight. "Oh, yes, Ender," he said. "Any time, Ender." Ender lifted his right leg and took off his shoe. He held it up. "See there on the toe? That's blood, Peter. It's not mine." Ooh, I'm gonna die. Ender squished a caterpillar, and now he's gonna squish me." There was no getting to him. Peter was a murderer at heart, and nobody knew it but Valentine and Ender. Mother came home and commiserated with Ender about the monitor. Father came home and kept saying it was such a wonderful surprise. They had such fantastic children that the government told them to have 3, and now the government didn't want to take any of them after all. So here they were with 3. They still had a 3rd. Until Ender wanted to scream at him, "I know I'm a 3rd. I know it. If you want, I'll go away so you don't have to be embarrassed in front of everybody. I'm sorry I lost the monitor, and now you have 3 kids and no obvious explanation. So inconvenient for you. I'm sorry. He lay in bed, staring upward into the darkness. On the bunk above him he could hear Peter turning and tossing restlessly. Then Peter slid off the bunk and walked out of the room. Ender heard the hushing sound of the toilet clearing. Then Peter stood silhouetted in the doorway. He thinks I'm asleep. He's going to kill me. Peter walked to the bed, and sure enough, he did not lift himself up to his bed. Instead, he came and stood by Ender's head. But he did not reach for a pillow to smother Ender. He did not have a weapon. He whispered, "Ender, I'm sorry. I know how it feels. I'm sorry. I'm your brother. I love you." A long time later, Peter's even breathing said that he was asleep. Ender peeled the Band-Aid from his neck, and for the second time that day, he cried.
The sister is our weak link. He really loves her.
I know. She can undo it all, from the start. He won't want to leave her.
So what are you going to do?
Persuade him that he wants to come with us more than he wants to stay with her.
And how are you going to do that?
I'll lie to him.
And if that doesn't work?
And I'll tell the truth. We're allowed to do that in emergencies. We can't plan for everything, you know.
Yeah.
Ender wasn't very hungry during breakfast. He kept wondering what it would be like at school, facing Stilson after yesterday's fight. What Stilson's friends would do, probably nothing, but he couldn't be sure. He didn't want to go. "You're not eating, Andrew," his mother said. Peter came into the room. "Morning, Ender. Thanks for leaving your slimy washcloth in the middle of the shower." "Just for you," Ender murmured. "Andrew, you have to eat." Ender held out his wrists, a gesture that said, "So feed it to me through a needle." "Very funny," Mother said. "I try to be concerned, but it makes no difference to my genius children." "It was all your genes that made us geniuses, Mom," said Peter. "We sure didn't get any from Dad." "I heard that," Father said, not looking up from the news that was being displayed on the table while he ate. "It would have been wasted if you hadn't." The table beeped. Someone was at the door. "Who is it?" Mother asked. Father thumbed a key and a man appeared on his video. He was wearing the only military uniform that meant anything anymore, the IF, the International Fleet. "I thought it was over," said Father. Peter said nothing, just poured milk over his cereal. And Ender thought, maybe I won't have to go to school today after all. Father coded the door open and got up from the table. "I'll see to it," he said. "Stay and eat." They stayed, but they didn't eat. A few moments later, Father came back into the room and beckoned to Mother. "You're in deep poo," said Peter. "They found out what you did to that kid at school, and now they're going to make you do time out in the belt." "I'm only 6, moron. I'm a juvenile." "You're a third turd. You've got no rights." Valentine came in, her hair in a sleepy halo around her face. "Where's Mom and Dad? I'm too sick to go to school." "Another oral exam, huh?" Peter said. "Shut up, Peter," said Valentine. "You should relax and enjoy it," said Peter. "It could be worse. I don't know how. It could be an anal exam." "Yuck, yuck," Valentine said. "Where are Mother and Father?" "Talking to a guy from IF." Instinctively, she looked at Ender. After all, for years they had expected someone to come and tell them that Ender had passed, that Ender was needed. "That's right. Look at him," Peter said. "But it might be me, you know. They might have realized I was the best of the lot after all." Peter's feelings were hurt, and so he was being a snot as usual. The door opened. "Ender," said Father. "You'd better come in here." "Sorry, Peter," Valentine taunted. Father glowered. "Children, this is no laughing matter." Ender followed Father into the parlor. The IF officer rose to his feet when they entered, but he did not extend a hand to Ender. Mother was twisting her wedding band on her finger. "Andrew," she said, "I never thought you were the kind to get in a fight." "The Stilson boy is in the hospital," Father said. "You really did a number on him. With your shoe, Ender. That wasn't exactly fair." Ender shook his head. He had expected someone from the school to come about Stilson, not an officer of the fleet. This was more serious than he had thought, and yet he couldn't think what else he could have done. "Do you have any explanation for your behavior, young man?" asked the officer. Ender shook his head again. He didn't know what to say, and he was afraid to reveal himself to be any more monstrous than his actions had made him out to be. I'll take it, whatever the punishment is, he thought. Let's get it over with. We're willing to consider extenuating circumstances, the officer said. But I must tell you, it doesn't look good. Kicking him in the groin, kicking him repeatedly in the face and body when he was down. It sounds like you really enjoyed it. I didn't, Ender whispered. Then why did you do it? He had his gang there, Ender said. So? This excuses anything? No. Tell me why you kept on kicking him. You had already won. Knocking him down won the first fight. I wanted to win all the next ones too, so they'd leave me alone. Ender couldn't help it. He was too afraid, too ashamed of his own acts. Though he tried not to, he cried again. Ender did not like to cry, and rarely did. Now, in less than a day, he had done it 3 times, and each time was worse. To cry in front of his mother and father and this military man, that was shameful. You took away the monitor, Ender said. I had to take care of myself, didn't I? Ender, you should have asked a grown-up for help, Father began. But the officer stood up and stepped across the room to Ender. He held out his hand. My name is Graf, Ender. Colonel Hiram Graf. I'm director of primary training at Battle School in the Belt. I've come to invite you to enter the school. After all. But the monitor, the final step in your testing was to see what would happen when the monitor came off. We don't always do it that way, but in your case... And he passed? Mother was incredulous. Putting the Stilson boy in the hospital? What would you have done if Andrew had killed him? Given him a medal? It isn't what he did, Mrs. Wiggin. It's why. Colonel Graf handed her a folder full of papers. Here are the requisitions. Your son has been cleared by the IF Selective Service. Of course, we already have your consent granted in writing at the time conception was confirmed, or he could not have been born. He has been ours from then, if he qualified. Father's voice was trembling as he spoke. It's not very kind of you to let us think you didn't want him and then to take him after all. And this charade about the Stilson boy, Mother said. It wasn't a charade, Mrs. Wiggin. Until we knew what Ender's motivation was, we couldn't be sure he wasn't another. We had to know what the action meant, or at least what Ender believed that it meant. Must you call him that stupid nickname? Mother began to cry. It's the name he calls himself. What are you going to do, Colonel Graf? Father asked. Walk out the door with him now? That depends, said Graf. On what? On whether Ender wants to come. Mother's weeping turned to bitter laughter. Oh, so it's voluntary after all. How sweet. For the 2 of you, the choice was made when Ender was conceived, but for Ender, the choice has not been made at all. Conscripts make good cannon fodder, but for officers we need volunteers. Officers? Ender asked. At the sound of his voice the others fell silent. Yes, said Graf. Battle School is for training future starship captains and commodores of flotillas and admirals of the fleet. Let's not have any deception here, Father said angrily. How many of the boys at the Battle School actually end up in command of ships? Unfortunately, Mr. Wiggin, that is classified information. But I can say that none of our boys who makes it through the first year has ever failed to receive a commission as an officer. And none has retired from a position of lower rank than Chief Executive Officer of an interplanetary vessel. Even in the domestic defense forces within our own solar system, there's honor to be had. How many make it through the first year? Asked Ender. All who want to, said Graf. Ender almost said, I want to, but he held his tongue. This would keep him out of school, but that was stupid. That was just a problem for a few days. It would keep him away from Peter. That was more important. That might be a matter of life itself. But to leave Mother and Father, and above all to leave Valentine, and become a soldier. Ender didn't like fighting. He didn't like Peter's kind, the strong against the weak, and he didn't like his own kind, either, the smart against the stupid. I think, Graf said, that Ender and I should have a private conversation. No, Father said. I won't take him without letting you speak to him again, Graf said. And you really can't stop me. Father glared at Graf a moment longer, then got up and left the room. Mother paused to squeeze Ender's hand. She closed the door behind her when she left. "Ender," Graf said, "if you come with me, you won't be back here for a long time. There aren't any vacations from battle school. No visitors, either. A full course of training lasts until you're 16 years old. You get your first leave under certain circumstances when you're 12. Believe me, Ender, people change in 6 years, in 10 years. Your sister Valentine will be a woman when you see her again if you come with me. You'll be strangers. You'll still love her, Ender, but you won't know her. You see, I'm not pretending it's easy. Mom and Daddy, I know you, Ender. I've been watching the monitor discs for some time. You won't miss your mother and father, not much, not for long, and they won't miss you long either." Tears came to Ender's eyes in spite of himself. He turned his face away, but would not reach up to wipe them. "They do love you, Ender, but you have to understand what your life has cost them. They were born religious, you know. Your father was baptized with the name John Paul Wieczorek, Catholic, the 7th of 9 children. 9 children. That was unthinkable, criminal. Yes. Well, people do strange things for a religion. You know the sanctions, Ender. They were not as harsh then, but still not easy. Only the first 2 children had a free education. Taxes steadily rose with each new child. Your father turned 16 and invoked the Non-Complying Families Act to separate himself from his family. He changed his name, renounced his religion, and vowed never to have more than the allotted 2 children. He meant it. All the shame and persecution he went through as a child, he vowed no child of his would go through it. Do you understand? He didn't want me. Well, no one wants a third anymore. You can't expect them to be glad, but your father and mother are a special case. They both renounced their religions. Your mother was a Mormon, but in fact their feelings are still ambiguous. Do you know what ambiguous means? They feel both ways. They're ashamed of having come from non-compliant families. They conceal it, to the degree that your mother refuses to admit to anyone that she was born in Utah, lest they suspect. Your father denies his Polish ancestry, since Poland is still a non-compliant nation and under international sanction because of it. So you see, having a third, even under the government's direct instructions, undoes everything they've been trying to do. I know that. But it's more complicated than that. Your father still named you with legitimate saints' names. In fact, he baptized all 3 of you himself as soon as he got you home after you were born. And your mother objected. They quarreled over it each time, not because she didn't want you baptized, but because she didn't want you baptized Catholic. They haven't really given up their religion. They look at you and see you as a badge of pride, because they were able to circumvent the law and have a third. But you're also a badge of cowardice, because they dare not go further and practice the non-compliance they still feel is right. And you're a badge of public shame, because at every step you interfere with their efforts at assimilation into normal complying society. How can you know all this? We monitored your brother and sister, Ender. You'd be amazed at how sensitive the instruments are. We were connected directly to your brain. We heard all that you heard, whether you were listening carefully or not, whether you understood or not. We understand. So my parents love me and don't love me. They love you. The question is whether they want you here. Your presence in this house is a constant disruption, a source of tension. Do you understand? I'm not the one who causes tension. Not anything you do, Ender. Your life itself. Your brother hates you because you are living proof that he wasn't good enough. Your parents resent you because of all the past they are trying to evade. Valentine loves me with all her heart. Completely, unstintingly, she's devoted to you, and you adore her. I told you it wouldn't be easy. What is it like there? Hard work, studies. Just like school here, except we put you into mathematics and computers much more heavily, military history, strategy and tactics, and above all, the battle room. What's that? War games. All the boys are organized into armies. Day after day, in zero gravity, there are mock battles. Nobody gets hurt, but winning and losing matter. Everybody starts as a common soldier taking orders. Older boys are your officers, and it's their duty to train you and command you in battle. More than that, I can't tell you. It's like playing buggers and astronauts, except that you have weapons that work, and fellow soldiers fighting beside you, and your whole future and the future of the human race depends on how well you learn, how well you fight. It's a hard life, and you won't have a normal childhood. Of course, with your mind, and as a third to boot, you wouldn't have a particularly normal childhood anyway. All boys? A few girls. They don't often pass the tests to get in. Too many centuries of evolution are working against them. None of them will be like Valentine anyway. But there'll be brothers there, Ender. Like Peter? Peter wasn't accepted, Ender, for the very reasons that you hate him. I don't hate him, I'm just afraid of him. Well, Peter isn't all bad, you know. He was the best we'd seen in a long time. We asked your parents to choose a daughter next. They would have anyway, hoping that Valentine would be Peter, but milder. She was too mild, and so we requisitioned you. To be half Peter and half Valentine, if things worked out right. Am I? As far as we can tell. Our tests are very good, Ender, but they don't tell us everything. In fact, when it comes down to it, they hardly tell us anything, but they're better than nothing. Graf leaned over and took Ender's hands in his. Ender Wiggin, if it were just a matter of choosing the best and happiest future for you, I'd tell you to stay home. Stay here. Grow up. Be happy. There are worse things than being a third, worse things than a big brother who can't make up his mind whether to be a human being or a jackal. Battle school is one of those worst things. But we need you. The buggers may seem like a game to you now, Ender, but they damn near wiped us out last time. They had us cold, outnumbered and outweaponed. The only thing that saved us was that we had the most brilliant military commander we ever found. Call it fate, call it God, call it damn fool luck. We had Mazer Rackham. But we don't have him now, Ender. We've scraped together everything mankind could produce, a fleet that makes the one they sent against us last time seem like a bunch of kids playing in a swimming pool. We have some new weapons, too, but it might not be enough even so, because in the 80 years since the last war, they've had as much time to prepare as we have. We need the best we can get, and we need them fast. Maybe you're not going to work out for us, and maybe you are. Maybe you'll break down under the pressure. Maybe it'll ruin your life. Maybe you'll hate me for coming here to your house today. But if there's a chance that because you're with the fleet, mankind might survive and the buggers might leave us alone forever, then I'm going to ask you to do it, to come with me. Ender had trouble focusing on Colonel Graf. The man looked far away and very small, as if Ender could pick him up with tweezers and drop him in a pocket. To leave everything here and to go to a place that was very hard, with no Valentine, no Mom and Dad. And then he thought of the films of the buggers that everyone had to see at least once a year. The Scathing of China, the Battle of the Belt, death and suffering and terror. And Mazer Rackham and his brilliant maneuvers, destroying an enemy fleet twice his size and twice his firepower, using the little human ships that seemed so frail and weak, like children fighting with grown-ups. And we won. I'm afraid, said Ender quietly, but I'll go with you. Tell me again, said Graf. It's what I was born for, isn't it? If I don't go, why am I alive? Not good enough, said Graf. I don't want to go, said Ender, but I will. Graf nodded. You can change your mind. Up until the time you get in my car with me, you can change your mind. After that, you stay at the pleasure of the international fleet. Do you understand that? Ender nodded. All right, let's tell them. Mother cried. Father held Ender tight. Peter shook his hand and said, You lucky little pin-headed fart-eater. Valentine kissed him and left her tears on his cheek. There was nothing to pack, no belongings to take. The school provides everything you need, from uniforms to school supplies, and as for toys, well, there's only one game. Goodbye, Ender said to his family. He reached up and took Colonel Graff's hand and walked out the door with him. "Kill some buggers for me," Peter shouted. "I love you, Andrew," Mother called. "We'll write you," Father said. And as he got into the car that waited silently in the corridor, he heard Valentine's anguished cry, "Come back to me. I love you forever."
With Ender, we have to strike a delicate balance. Isolate him enough that he remains creative. Otherwise, he'll adopt the system here and we'll lose him. At the same time, we need to make sure he keeps a strong ability to lead.
If he earns rank, he'll lead.
It isn't that simple. Mazer Rackham could handle his little fleet and win. By the time this war happens, there'll be too much, even for a genius. Too many little boats. He has to work smoothly with his subordinates.
Oh, good. He has to be a genius and nice, too.
Not nice. Nice will let the buggers have us all.
So what, so you're going to isolate him?
I'll have him completely separated from the rest of the boys by the time we get to the school.
Well, I have no doubt of it. I'll be waiting for you to get here. I watched the vids of what he did to the Stilson boy. This is not a sweet little kid you're bringing up here.
That's where you're mistaken. He's even sweeter than he looks. But don't worry. We'll purge that in a hurry.
Sometimes I think you enjoy breaking these little geniuses.
There is an art to it, and I'm very, very good at it. But enjoy? Well, maybe. When they put back the pieces afterward, it makes them better.
Oh, you are a monster.
Thanks. Does this mean I get a raise?
Yeah, just a medal. The budget isn't inexhaustible.
They say that weightlessness can cause disorientation, especially in children whose sense of direction isn't yet secure. But Ender was disoriented before he left Earth's gravity, before the shuttle launch even began. There were 19 other boys in his launch. They filed out of the bus and into the elevator. They talked and joked and bragged and laughed. Ender kept his silence. He noticed how Graff and the other officers were watching them, analyzing. Everything we do means something, Ender realized. Them laughing mean not laughing. He toyed with the idea of trying to be like the other boys, but he couldn't think of any jokes, and none of theirs seemed funny. Wherever their laughter came from, Ender couldn't find such a place in himself. He was afraid, and fear made him serious. They had dressed him in a uniform, all in a single piece. It felt funny not to have a belt cinched around his waist. He felt baggy and naked, dressed like that. There were TV cameras going, perched like animals on the shoulders of crouching, prowling men. The men moved slowly, cat-like, so the camera motion would be smooth. Ender caught himself moving smoothly, too. He imagined himself being on TV in an interview, the announcer asking him, "How do you feel, Mr. Wiggin?" "Actually quite well, except hungry." "Hungry? Oh, yes, they don't let you eat for 20 hours before the launch. How interesting, I never knew that. All of us are quite hungry, actually." And all the while during the interview, Ender and the TV guy would slink along smoothly in front of the cameraman, taking long, lithe strides. The TV guy was letting him be the spokesman for all the boys, though Ender was barely competent to speak for himself. For the first time, Ender felt like laughing. He smiled. The other boys near him were laughing at the moment, too, for another reason. They think I'm smiling at their joke, thought Ender, but I'm smiling at something much funnier. "Go up the ladder one at a time," said an officer. "When you come to an aisle with empty seats, take one. There aren't any window seats." It was a joke. The other boys laughed. Ender was near the last, but not the very last. The TV cameras did not give up, though. Will Valentine see me disappear into the shuttle? He thought of waving at her, of running to the cameraman and saying, "Can I tell Valentine goodbye?" He didn't know that it would be censored out of the tape if he did, for the boys soaring out to battle school were all supposed to be heroes. They weren't supposed to miss anybody. Ender didn't know about the censorship, but he did know that running to the cameras would be wrong. He walked the short bridge to the door in the shuttle. He noticed that the wall to his right was carpeted like a floor. That was where the disorientation began. The moment he thought of the wall as a floor, he began to feel like he was walking on a wall. He got to the ladder and noticed that the vertical surface behind it was also carpeted. I am climbing up the floor, hand over hand, step by step. And then, for fun, he pretended that he was climbing down the wall. He did it almost instantly in his mind, convinced himself against the best evidence of gravity until he reached an empty seat. He found himself gripping the seat tightly, even though gravity pulled him firmly against it. The other boys were bouncing on their seats a little, poking and pushing, shouting. Ender carefully found the straps, figured out how they fit together to hold him at crotch, waist, and shoulders. He imagined the ship dangling upside down on the undersurface of the earth, the giant fingers of gravity holding them firmly in place. But we will slip away, he thought. We are going to fall off this planet. He did not know its significance at the time. Later, though, he would remember that it was even before he left Earth that he first thought of it as a planet like any other, not particularly his own. Already figured it out, said Graf. He was standing on the ladder. Coming with us? Ender asked. Well, I don't usually come down for recruiting, Graf said. I'm kind of in charge there, administrator of the school, like a principal. They told me I had to come back or I'd lose my job. He smiled. Ender smiled back. He felt comfortable with Graf. Graf was good, and he was principal of the battle school. Ender relaxed a little. He would have a friend there. Adults helped the other boys belt themselves in place, those who hadn't done as Ender did. Then they waited for an hour while a TV at the front of the shuttle introduced them to shuttle flight, the history of spaceflight, and their possible future with the great starships of the IF. Very boring stuff. Ender had seen such films before, except that he had not been belted into a seat inside the shuttle, hanging upside down from the belly of Earth. The launch wasn't bad, a little scary. Some jolting, a few moments of panic that this might be the first failed launch since the early days of the shuttle. The movies hadn't made it plain how much violence you could experience lying on your back in a soft chair. Then it was over, and he really was hanging by the straps, no gravity anywhere. But because he had already reoriented himself, he was not surprised when Graf came up the ladder backward as if he were climbing down to the front of the shuttle. Nor did it bother him when Graf hooked his feet under a rung and pushed off with his hands, so that suddenly he swung upright as if this were an ordinary airplane. The reorientations were too much for some. One boy gagged. Ender understood then why they had been forbidden to eat anything for 20 hours before the launch. Vomiting in null gravity wouldn't be fun. But for Ender, Graf's gravity game was fun, and he carried it further, imagining that Graf was actually hanging upside down from the center aisle and then picturing him sticking straight out from a side wall. Gravity could go any which way, however I want it to go. I can make Graf stand on his head and he doesn't even know it. What do you think is so funny, Wiggin? Graf's voice was sharp and angry. What did I do wrong, thought Ender. Did I laugh out loud? I asked you a question, soldier, barked Graf. Oh, yes. This is the beginning of the training routine. Ender had seen some military shows on TV, and they always shouted a lot at the beginning of training before the soldiers and the officer became good friends. Yes, sir, Ender said. Well, answer it then. I thought of you hanging upside down by your feet. I thought it was funny. It sounded stupid now, with Graf looking at him coldly. To you, I suppose, it is funny. Is it funny to anybody else here? Murmurs of no. Well, why isn't it? Graf looked at them all with contempt. Scumbrains, that's what we've got in this launch. Pin-headed little morons. Only one of you had the brains to realize that in null gravity directions are whatever you conceive them to be. Do you understand that, Shafts? The boy nodded. No, you didn't. Of course you didn't. Not only stupid, but a liar, too. There's only one boy on this launch with any brains at all, and that's Ender Wiggin.
Take a good look at him, little boys. He's going to be a commander when you're still in diapers up there, because he knows how to think in null gravity, and you just want to throw up. Well, this wasn't the way the show was supposed to go. Graf was supposed to pick on him, not set him up as the best. They were supposed to be against each other at first so they could become friends later. Most of you are going to ice out. Get used to that, little boys. Most of you are going to end up in combat school because you don't have the brains to handle deep space piloting. Most of you aren't worth the price of bringing you up here to battle school because you don't have what it takes. Some of you might make it. Some of you might be worth something to humanity, but don't bet on it. I'm betting on only one. Suddenly, Graf did a backflip and caught the ladder with his hands, then swung his feet away from the ladder, doing a handstand if the floor was down, dangling by his hands if the floor was up. Hand over hand, he swung himself back along the aisle to his seat. "Looks like you've got it made here," whispered the boy next to him. Ender shook his head. "Oh, won't even talk to me," the boy said. "I didn't ask him to say that stuff," Ender whispered. He felt a sharp pain on the top of his head. Then again, some giggles from behind him. The boy in the next seat back must have unfastened his straps. Again, a blow to the head. "Go away," Ender thought. "I didn't do anything to you." Again, a blow to the head. Laughter from the boys. Didn't Graf see this? Wasn't he going to stop it? Another blow, harder. It really hurt. Where was Graf? Then it became clear. Graf had deliberately caused it. It was worse than the abuse in the shows. When the sergeant picked on you, the others liked you better, but when the officer prefers you, the others hate you. "Hey, fart eater," came the whisper from behind him. He was hit on the head again. "You like this? Hey, super brain, is this fun?" Another blow, this one so hard that Ender cried out softly with the pain. If Graf was setting him up, there'd be no help unless he helped himself. He waited until he thought another blow was about to come. Now, he thought, and yes, the blow was there. It hurt, but Ender was already trying to sense the coming of the next blow. Now, and yes, right on time. "I've got you," Ender thought. Just as the next blow was coming, Ender reached up with both hands, snatched the boy by the wrist, and then pulled down on the arm hard. In gravity, the boy would have been jammed against Ender's seat back, hurting his chest. In null gravity, however, he flipped over the seat completely, up toward the ceiling. Ender wasn't expecting it. He hadn't realized how null gravity magnified the effects of even a child's movements. The boy sailed through the air, bouncing against the ceiling, then down against another boy in his seat, then out into the aisle, his arms flailing until he screamed as his body slammed into the bulkhead at the front of the compartment, his left arm twisted under him. It took only seconds. Graf was already there, snatching the boy out of the air. Deftly, he propelled him down the aisle toward the other man. "Left arm, broken, I think," he said. In moments, the boy had been given a drug and lay quietly in the air as the officer ballooned the splint around his arm. Ender felt sick. He had only meant to catch the boy's arm. No, he had meant to hurt him, and had pulled with all his strength. He hadn't meant it to be so public, but the boy was feeling exactly the pain Ender had meant him to feel. Null gravity had betrayed him, that was all. I am Peter. I'm just like him. And Ender hated himself. Graf stayed at the front of the cabin. "What are you, slow learners? In your feeble little minds, haven't you picked up one little fact? You were brought here to be soldiers. In your old schools, in your old families, maybe you were the big shot. Maybe you were tough. Maybe you were smart. But we chose the best of the best, and that's the only kind of kid you're going to meet now. And when I tell you Ender Wiggin is the best in this launch, take the hint, my little dorklings. Don't mess with him. Little boys have died in battle school before. Do I make myself clear?" There was silence the rest of the launch. The boy sitting next to Ender was scrupulously careful not to touch him. "I am not a killer," Ender said to himself over and over. "I am not Peter. No matter what Graf says, I'm not. I was defending myself. I bore it a long time. I was patient. I'm not what he said. A voice over the speaker told them they were approaching the school. It took 20 minutes to decelerate and dock. Ender lagged behind the others. They were not unwilling to let him be the last to leave the shuttle, climbing upward in the direction that had been down when they embarked. Graf was waiting at the end of the narrow tube that led from the shuttle into the heart of the battle school. "Was it a good flight, Ender?" Graf asked, cheerfully. "I thought you were my friend." Despite himself, Ender's voice trembled. Graf looked puzzled. "Whatever gave you that idea, Ender?" Because you spoke nicely to me, and honestly, you didn't lie." "I won't lie now either," said Graf. "My job isn't to be friends. My job is to produce the best soldiers in the world, in the whole history of the world. We need a Napoleon, an Alexander, except that Napoleon lost in the end and Alexander flamed out and died young. We need a Julius Caesar, except that he made himself dictator and died for it. My job is to produce such a creature and all the men and women he'll need to help him. Nowhere in that does it say I have to make friends with children. You made them hate me. So, what will you do about it? Crawl into a corner, start kissing their little backside so they'll love you again? There's only one thing that will make them stop hating you, and that's being so good at what you do that they can't ignore you. I told them you were the best. Now you damn well better be. What if I can't? Then too bad. Look, Ender, I'm sorry if you're lonely and afraid, but the buggers are out there. 10 billion, 100 billion, 1,000,000 billion of them for all we know, with as many ships for all we know, with weapons we can't understand, and a willingness to use those weapons to wipe us out. It isn't the world at stake, Ender, just us, just humankind. As far as the rest of the biosphere is concerned, we could be wiped out and it would adjust. It would get on with the next step in evolution. But humanity doesn't want to die. As a species, we have evolved to survive. And the way we do it is by straining, and at last, every few generations giving birth to genius. The one who invents the wheel, and light, and flight, the one who builds a city, a nation, an empire. Do you understand any of this? Ender thought he did, but wasn't sure, and so said nothing. No, of course not. So I'll put it bluntly. Human beings are free except when humanity needs them. Maybe humanity needs you to do something. Maybe humanity needs me to find out what you're good for. We might both do despicable things, Ender, but if humankind survives, then we were good tools. Is that all? Just tools? Individual human beings are all tools that the others use to help us all survive. That's a lie. No, it's just a half-truth. You can worry about the other half after we win this war. It'll be over before I grow up, Ender said. I hope you're wrong, said Graf. By the way, you aren't helping yourself at all talking to me. The other boys are no doubt telling each other that old Ender Wiggin is back there licking up to Graf. If word once gets around that you're a teacher's boy, you're iced for sure. In other words, go away and leave me alone. Goodbye, Ender said. He pulled himself hand over hand along the tube where the other boys had gone. Graf watched him go. One of the teachers near him said, "Is that the one?" "God knows," said Graf. "If Ender isn't him, then he'd better show up soon." "Maybe it's nobody," said the teacher. "Maybe. But if that's the case, Anderson, then in my opinion, God is a bugger. You can quote me on that." "I will." They stood in silence a while longer. "Anderson?" "The kid's wrong. I am his friend." "I know. He's clean, right to the heart. He's good. I've read the reports. Anderson, think what we're going to do to him." Anderson was defiant. "We're going to make him the best military commander in history. and then put the fate of the world on his shoulders. For his sake, I hope it isn't him. I do. Cheer up. The buggers may kill us all before he graduates. Graff smiled. Yeah, you're right. I feel better already.
You have my admiration. Breaking an arm, oof, that was a masterstroke.
That was an accident.
Really? And I've already commended you in your official report.
It's too strong. It makes that other little bastard into a hero. It could screw up training for a lot of kids. I thought Ender might call for help.
Call for help? I thought that was what you valued most in him, that he settles his own problems. When he's out there surrounded by an enemy fleet, there ain't gonna be nobody to help him if he calls.
Who would have guessed the little sucker'd be out of his seat, and that he'd land just wrong against the bulkhead?
Just one more example of the stupidity of the military. If you had any brains, you'd be in a real career, like selling life insurance.
You too, mastermind.
Hey, we just gotta face the fact that we're second-rate, with the fate of humanity in our hands. Gives you a delicious feeling of power, doesn't it? Especially because this time, if we lose, there won't be any criticism of us at all.
I never thought of it that way. But let's not lose.
See how Ender handles it. If we've already lost him, if he can't handle this, who next? Who else?
I'll make up a list.
In the meantime, figure out how to unlose Ender.
I told you. His isolation can't be broken. He can never come to believe that anybody will ever help him out. Ever. If he once thinks that there's an easy way out, he's wrecked.
You're right. That would be terrible. If he believed he had a friend.
He can have friends. It's parents he can't have.
Oh.
The other boys had already chosen their bunks when Ender arrived. Ender stopped in the doorway of the dormitory, looking for the sole remaining bed. The ceiling was low. Ender could reach up and touch it. A child-sized room with the bottom bunk resting on the floor. The other boys were watching him, corner-wise. Sure enough, the bottom bunk right by the door was the only empty bed. For a moment it occurred to Ender that by letting the others put him in the worst place, he was inviting later bullying, yet he couldn't very well oust someone else. So he smiled broadly. "Hey, thanks," he said, not sarcastically at all. He said it as sincerely as if they had reserved for him the best position. "I thought I was going to have to ask for a low bunk by the door." He sat down and looked in the locker that stood open at the foot of the bunk. There was a paper taped to the inside of the door. "Place your hand on the scanner at the head of your bunk and speak your name twice." Ender found the scanner, a sheet of opaque plastic. He put his left hand on it and said, "Ender Wiggin, Ender Wiggin." The scanner glowed green for a moment. Ender closed his locker and tried to reopen it. He couldn't. Then he put his hand on the scanner and said, "Ender Wiggin." The locker popped open. So did 3 other compartments. One of them contained 4 jumpsuits like the one he was wearing and 1 white one. Another compartment contained a small desk, just like the ones at school. So they weren't through with studies yet. It was the largest compartment that contained the prize. It looked like a spacesuit at first glance, complete with helmet and gloves, but it wasn't. There was no airtight seal. Still, it would effectively cover the whole body. It was thickly padded. It was also a little stiff, and there was a pistol within. A laser gun, it looked like, since the end was solid, clear glass. But surely they wouldn't let children have lethal weapons. "Not laser," said a man. Ender looked up. It was one he hadn't seen before, a young and kind-looking man. "But it has a tight enough beam, well-focused. You can aim it and make a 3-inch circle of light on a wall 100 meters off." "What's it for?" Ender asked. "One of the games we played during recreation. Does anyone else have his locker open?" The man looked around. "I mean, have you followed directions and coded in your voices and hands? You can't get into the lockers until you do. This room is your home for the first year or so here at the battle school, so get the bunk you want and stay with it. Ordinarily, we let you elect your chief officer and install him in the lower bunk by the door, but apparently that position has been taken. Can't recode the lockers now, so think about whom you want to choose. Dinner in 7 minutes. Follow the lighted dots on the floor. Your color code is red, yellow, yellow. Whenever you're assigned a path to follow, it will be red, yellow, yellow. 3 dots side by side. Go where those lights indicate. What's your color code, boys? Red, yellow, yellow. Very good. My name is Dap. I'm your mom for the next few months." The boys laughed. "Hey, laugh all you like, but keep it in mind. If you get lost in the school, which is quite possible, don't go opening doors. Some of them lead outside." More laughter. "Instead, just tell someone that your mom is Dap, and they'll call me. Or tell them your color, and they'll light up a path for you to get home. If you have a problem, come talk to me. Remember, I'm the only person here who's paid to be nice to you, but not too nice. Give me any lip and I'll break your face, okay?" They laughed again. Dap had a room full of friends. Frightened children are so easy to win. "Which way is down? Anybody tell me?" They told him. "Okay, that's true, but that direction is toward the outside. The ship is spinning, and that's what makes it feel like that is down. The floor actually curves around in that direction. Keep going long enough that way, and you come back to where you started. Except don't try it, because up that way is teachers' quarters, and up that way is the bigger kids. And the bigger kids don't like launchies butting in. You might get pushed around. In fact, you will get pushed around. And when you do, don't come crying to me. Got it? This is battle school, not nursery school." "What are we supposed to do then?" asked a boy, a really small black kid who had a top bunk near Ender's. "If you don't like getting pushed around, figure out for yourself what to do about it. But I warn you, murder is strictly against the rules. So is any deliberate injury. I understand there was one attempted murder on the way up here, a broken arm. That kind of thing happens again, somebody ices out. You got it?" "What's icing out?" asked the boy with his arm puffed up in a splint. "Ice. Put out in the cold, sent earthside, finished at battle school." Nobody looked at Ender. "So, boys, if any of you are thinking of being troublemakers, at least be clever about it, okay?" Dap left. They still didn't look at Ender. Ender felt the fear grow in his belly. The kid whose arm he broke, Ender didn't feel sorry for him. He was a Stilson, and like Stilson, he was already gathering a gang. A little knot of kids, several of the bigger ones. They were laughing at the far end of the room, and every now and then one of them would turn to look at Ender. With all his heart, Ender wanted to go home. What did any of this have to do with saving the world? There was no monitor now. It was Ender against the gang again, only they were right in his room. Peter again, but without Valentine. The fear stayed all through dinner as no one sat beside him in the mess hall. The other boys were talking about things, the big scoreboard on one wall, the food, the bigger kids. Ender could only watch in isolation. The scoreboards were team standings, win-loss records with the most recent scores. Some of the bigger boys apparently had bets on the most recent games. Two teams, Manticore and Asp, had no recent score. These boxes were flashing. Ender decided they must be playing right now. He noticed that the older boys were divided into groups according to the uniforms they wore. Some with different uniforms were talking together, but generally the groups each had their own area. Launchies, their own group, and the 2 or 3 next older groups all had plain blue uniforms. But the big kids, the ones that were on teams, they were wearing much more flamboyant clothing. Ender tried to guess which ones went with which name. Scorpion and Spider were easy, so were Flame and Tide. A bigger boy came to sit by him. Not just a little bigger. He looked to be 12 or 13, getting his man's growth started. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Ender said. "I'm Mick." "Ender? That's a name?" "Since I was little, it's what my sister called me." "Not a bad name here. Ender, Finisher. Eh?" "Hope so." "Ender, you the bugger in your launch?" Ender shrugged. "I noticed you eating all alone. Every launch has one like that, kid that nobody takes to right away. Sometimes I think the teachers do it on purpose. The teachers aren't very nice, you'll notice that." "Yeah." "So you the bugger?" "I guess so." "Hey, nothing to cry about, you know." He gave Ender his roll and took Ender's pudding. "Eat nutritious stuff, it'll keep you strong." Mick dug into the pudding. "What about you?" asked Ender. "Me? I'm nothing. I'm a fart in the air conditioning. I'm always there, but most of the time nobody knows it." Ender smiled tentatively. "Yeah, funny, but no joke. I got nowhere here. I'm getting big now. They're going to send me to my next school pretty soon. No way it'll be tactical school for me. I've never been a leader, you see. Only the guys who get to be leaders have a shot at it. How do you get to be a leader? Hey, if I knew you think I'd be like this, how many guys my size do you see here? Not many. Ender didn't say it. A few. I'm not the only half-iced bugger fodder. A few of us. The other guys, they're all commanders. All the guys from my launch have their own teams now, not me. Ender nodded. Listen, little guy, I'm doing you a favor. Make friends, be a leader, kiss butts if you got to, but if the other guys despise you, well, you know what I mean. Ender nodded again. Nah, you don't know nothing. You launchies are all alike. You don't know nothing. Mine's like space, nothing there. And if anything hits you, you fall apart. Look, when you end up like me, don't forget that somebody warned you. It's the last nice thing anybody's going to do for you. So why did you tell me? Asked Ender. What are you, smout mouth? Shut up and eat. Ender shut up and ate. He didn't like Mick, and he knew there was no chance he would end up like that. Maybe that was what the teachers were planning, but Ender didn't intend to fit in with their plans. I will not be the bugger of my group, Ender thought. I didn't leave Valentine and Mother and Father to come here just to be iced. As he lifted his fork to his mouth, he could feel his family around him, as they always had been. He knew just which way to turn his head to look up and see Mother, trying to get Valentine not to slurp. He knew just where Father would be, scanning the news on the table while pretending to be part of the dinner conversation. Peter pretending to take a crushed pea out of his nose. Even Peter could be funny. It was a mistake to think of them. He felt a sob rise in his throat and swallowed it down. He could not see his plate. He could not cry. There was no chance that he would be treated with compassion. Dap was not Mother. Any sign of weakness would tell the Stilsons and Peters that this boy could be broken. Ender did what he always did when Peter tormented him. He began to count doubles. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and on, as high as he could hold the numbers in his head. 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, 8192, 16384, 32768, 65536, 131072, 262144. At 67108864, he began to be unsure. Had he slipped out a digit? Should he be in the 10 millions or the 100 millions or just the millions? He tried doubling again and lost it. 1342 something 16 or 17738. It was gone. Start over again. All the doubling he could hold. The pain was gone. The tears were gone. He would not cry. Until that night, when the lights were dim and in the distance he could hear several boys whimpering for their mothers or fathers or dogs. Then he could not help himself. His lips formed Valentine's name. He could hear her voice laughing in the distance just down the hall. He could see Mother passing his door, looking in to be sure he was all right. He could hear Father laughing at the video. It was all so clear, and it would never be that way again. I'll be old when I ever see them again. 12 at the earliest. Why did I say yes? What was I such a fool for? Going to school would have been nothing, facing Stilson every day, and Peter, he was a pissant. Ender wasn't afraid of him. I want to go home, he whispered. But his whisper was the whisper he used when he cried out in pain when Peter tormented him. The sound didn't travel farther than his own ears, and sometimes not that far. And his tears could fall unwanted on his sheet, but his sobs were so gentle that they did not shake the bed, so quiet they could not be heard. But the ache was there, thick in his throat and the front of his face, hot in his chest and in his eyes. I want to go home. Dap came to the door that night and moved quietly among the beds, touching a hand here, a forehead there. Where he went, there was more crying, not less. The touch of kindness in this frightening place was enough to push some over the edge into tears. Not Ender, though. When Dap came, his crying was over, and his face was dry. It was the lying face he presented to mother and father when Peter had been cruel to him, and he dared not let it show. Thank you for this, Peter. For dry eyes and silent weeping. You taught me how to hide anything I felt. More than ever, I need that now. This was school. Every day, hours of classes, reading, numbers, history. Videos of the bloody battles in space, the Marines spraying their guts all over the walls of the bugger ships, holos of the clean wars of the fleet, ships turning into puffs of light as the spacecraft killed each other deftly in the deep night. Many things to learn. Ender worked as hard as anyone. All of them struggled for the first time in their lives, as for the first time in their lives they competed with classmates who were at least as bright as they. But the games, that was what they lived for. That was what filled the hours between waking and sleeping. Dap introduced them to the game room on their second day. It was up, way above the decks where the boys lived and worked. They climbed ladders to where the gravity weakened, and there in the cavern they saw the dazzling lights of the games. Some of the games they knew. Some they had even played at home, simple ones and hard ones. Ender walked past the two-dimensional games on video and began to study the games the bigger boys played, the holographic games with objects hovering in the air. He was the only launchy in that part of the room, and every now and then one of the bigger boys would shove him out of the way. What are you doing here? Get lost, fly off. And of course he would fly in the lower gravity here, leave his feet, and soar until he ran into something or someone. Every time, though, he extricated himself and went back, perhaps to a different spot, to get a different angle on the game. He was too small to see the controls, how the game was actually done. That didn't matter. He got the movement of it in the air, the way the player dug tunnels in the darkness, tunnels of light which the enemy ships would search for and then follow mercilessly until they caught the player's ship. The player could make traps, mines, drifting bombs, loops in the air that forced the enemy ships to repeat endlessly. Some of the players were clever, others lost quickly. Ender liked it better, though, when two boys played against each other. Then they had to use each other's tunnels, and it quickly became clear which of them was worth anything at the strategy of it. Within an hour or so, it began to pall. Ender understood the regularities by then, understood the rules the computer was following, so that he knew he could always, once he mastered the controls, outmaneuver the enemy. Spirals when the enemy was like this, loops when the enemy was like that, lie in wait at one trap, lay 7 traps, and then lure them like this. There was no challenge to it then, just a matter of playing until the computer got so fast that no human reflexes could overcome it. That wasn't fun. It was the other boys he wanted to play. The boys who had been so trained by the computer that even when they played against each other, they each tried to emulate the computer, think like a machine instead of a boy. I could beat them this way, I could beat them that way. I'd like a turn against you, he said to the boy who had just won. Lousy me, what is this? Asked the boy. Is it a bug or a bugger? A new flock of dwarfs just came aboard, said another boy. But it talks. Did you know they could talk? I see, said Ender. You're afraid to play me 2 out of 3. Beating you, said the boy, would be as easy as pissing in the shower. And not half as fun, said another. I'm Ender Wiggin. Listen up, scrunch face. You nobody got that. You nobody got that. You not anybody till you got your first kill. Got that? The slang of the older boys had its own rhythm. Ender picked it up quick enough. If I'm nobody, then how come you scared to play me 2 out of 3? Now the other guys were impatient. Kill the squirt quick and let's get on with it. So Ender took his place at the unfamiliar controls. His hands were small, but the controls were simple enough. It took only a little experimentation to find out which buttons used certain weapons. Movement control was a standard wire ball. His reflexes were slow at first. The other boy, whose name he still didn't know, got ahead quickly. But Ender learned a lot and was doing much better by the time the game ended. Satisfied, Launchy? 2 out of 3. We don't allow 2 out of 3 games. So you beat me the first time I ever touched the game, Ender said. If you can't do it twice, you can't do it at all. They played again, and this time Ender was deft enough to pull off a few maneuvers that the boy had obviously never seen before. His patterns couldn't cope with them. Ender didn't win easily, but he won. The bigger boys stopped laughing and joking then. The third game went in total silence. Ender won it quickly and efficiently. When the game ended, one of the older boys said, "About time they replaced this machine. Getting so any pin brain can beat it now." Not a word of congratulation, just total silence as Ender walked away. He didn't go far, just stood off in the near distance and watched as the next players tried to use the things he had shown them. Any pin brain? Ender smiled inwardly. Oh, they won't forget me. He felt good. He had won something, and against older boys. Probably not the best of the older boys, but he no longer had the panicked feeling that he might be out of his depth, that battle school might be too much for him. All he had to do was watch the game and understand how things worked, and then he could use the system and even excel. It was the waiting and watching that cost the most, for during that time he had to endure. The boy whose arm he had broken was out for vengeance. His name, Ender quickly learned, was Bernard. He spoke his own name with a French accent, since the French, with their arrogant separatism, insisted that the teaching of Standard not begin until the age of 4, when the French language patterns were already set. His accent made him exotic and interesting. His broken arm made him a martyr. His sadism made him a natural focus for all those who loved pain in others. Ender became their enemy. Little things. Kicking his bed every time they went in and out of the door, jostling him with his meal tray, tripping him on the ladders. Ender learned quickly not to leave anything of his outside his lockers. He also learned to be quick on his feet, to catch himself. Maladroit, Bernard called him once, and the name stuck. There were times when Ender was very angry. With Bernard, of course, anger was inadequate. It was the kind of person he was, a tormentor. What enraged Ender was how willingly the others went along with him. Surely they knew there was no justice in Bernard's revenge. Surely they knew that he had struck first at Ender in the shuttle, that Ender had only been responding to violence. If they knew, they acted as if they didn't. Even if they did not know, they should be able to tell from Bernard himself that he was a snake. After all, Ender wasn't his only target. Bernard was setting up a kingdom, wasn't he? Ender watched from the fringes of the group as Bernard established the hierarchy. Some of the boys were useful to him, and he flattered them outrageously. Some of the boys were willing servants, doing whatever he wanted, even though he treated them with contempt. But a few chafed under Bernard's rule. Ender, watching, knew who resented Bernard. Shen was small, ambitious, and easily needled. Bernard had discovered that quickly and started calling him Worm. "Because he's so small," Bernard said, "and because he wriggles. Look how he shimmies his butt when he walks." Shen stormed off, but they only laughed louder. "Look at his butt. See ya, Worm." Ender said nothing to Shen. It would be too obvious then that he was starting his own competing gang. He just sat with his desk on his lap, looking as studious as possible. He was not studying. He was telling his desk to keep sending a message into the interrupt queue every 30 seconds. The message was to everyone, and it was short and to the point. What made it hard was figuring out how to disguise who it was from the way the teachers could. Messages from one of the boys always had their name automatically inserted. Ender hadn't cracked the teacher's security system yet, so he couldn't pretend to be a teacher, but he was able to set up a file for a non-existent student whom he whimsically named God. Only when the message was ready to go did he try to catch Shen's eye. Like all the other boys, he was watching Bernard and his cronies laugh and joke, making fun of the math teacher, who often stopped in mid-sentence and looked around as if he had been let off the bus at the wrong stop and didn't know where he was. Eventually, though, Shen glanced around. Ender nodded to him, pointed to his desk, and smiled. Shen looked puzzled. Ender held up his desk a little and then pointed at it. Shen reached for his own desk. Ender sent the message then. Shen saw it almost at once. Shen read it, then laughed aloud. He looked at Ender as if to say, "Did you do this?" Ender shrugged to say, "I don't know who did it, but it sure wasn't me." Shen laughed again, and several of the other boys who were not close to Bernard's group got out their desks and looked. Every 30 seconds the message appeared on every desk, marched around the screen quickly, then disappeared. The boys laughed together. "What's so funny?" Bernard asked. Ender made sure he was not smiling when Bernard looked around the room, imitating the fear that so many others felt. Shen, of course, smiled all the more defiantly. It took a moment. Then Bernard told one of his boys to bring out a desk. Together they read the message. "Cover your butt. Bernard is watching. God." Bernard went red with anger. "Who did this?" he shouted. "God," said Shen. "It sure as hell wasn't you. This takes too much brains for a worm." Ender's message expired after 5 minutes. After a while, a message from Bernard appeared on his desk. "I know it was you, Bernard." Ender didn't look up. He acted, in fact, as if he hadn't seen the message. Bernard just wants to catch me looking guilty. He doesn't know. Of course, it didn't matter if he knew. Bernard would punish him all the more because he had to rebuild his position. The one thing he couldn't stand was having the other boys laughing at him. He had to make clear who was boss. So Ender got knocked down in the shower that morning. One of Bernard's boys pretended to trip over him and managed to plant a knee in his belly. Ender took it in silence. He was still watching, as far as the open war was concerned. He would do nothing. But in the other war, the war of desks, he already had his next attack in place. When he got back from the shower, Bernard was raging, kicking beds and yelling at boys. "I didn't write it. Shut up!" Marching constantly around every boy's desk was this message. "I love your butt. Let me kiss it, Bernard." "I didn't write that message!" Bernard shouted. After the shouting had been going on for some time, Dap appeared at the door. "What's the fuss?" he asked. "Somebody's been writing messages using my name." Bernard was sullen. "What message?" "It doesn't matter what message." "It does to me." Dap picked up the nearest desk, which happened to belong to the boy who bunked above Ender. Dap read it, smiled very slightly, gave back the desk. "Interesting," he said. "Aren't you going to find out who did it?" demanded Bernard. "Oh, I know who did it," Dap said. Yes, Ender thought, the system was too easily broken. They mean us to break it, or sections of it. They know it was me. "Well, who then?" Bernard shouted. "Are you shouting at me, soldier?" asked Dap very softly. At once the mood in the room changed. From rage on the part of Bernard's closest friends, and barely contained mirth among the rest, all became somber. Authority was about to speak. "No, sir," said Bernard. "Everybody knows that the system automatically puts on the name of the sender." "I didn't write that," Bernard said. "Shouting?" asked Dap. "Yesterday somebody sent a message that was signed God," Bernard said. "Really?" said Dap. "I didn't know he was signed on to the system." Dap turned and left, and the room filled with laughter. Bernard's attempt to be ruler of the room was broken. Only a few stayed with him now. But they were the most vicious, and Ender knew that until he was through watching, it would go hard on him. Still, his tampering with the system had done its work. Bernard was contained, and all the boys who had some quality were free of him. Best of all, Ender had done it without sending him to the hospital, much better this way. Then he settled down to the serious business of designing a security system for his own desk, since the safeguards built into the system were obviously inadequate. If a 6-year-old could break them down, they were obviously put there as a plaything, not serious security. Just another game that the teachers set up for us. And this one I'm good at. "How did you do that?" Shen asked him at breakfast. Ender noted quietly that this was the first time another launchy from his own class had sat with him at a meal. "Do what?" he asked. "Send a message with a fake name. And Bernard's name. That was great. They're calling him Butt Watcher now. Just Watcher in front of the teachers, but everybody knows what he's watching." "Poor Bernard," Ender murmured. "And he's so sensitive." "Come on, Ender, you broke into the system. How'd you do it?" Ender shook his head and smiled. "Thanks for thinking I'm bright enough to do that. I just happened to see it first, that's all. Okay, you don't have to tell me, said Shen. Still, it was great. They ate in silence for a moment. Do I wiggle my butt when I walk? Nah, Ender said. Just a little. Just don't take such big, long steps, that's all. Shen nodded. The only person who'd ever noticed was Bernard. He's a pig, said Shen. Ender shrugged. On the whole, pigs aren't so bad. Shen laughed. You're right. I wasn't being fair to the pigs. They laughed together, and 2 other launchies joined them. Ender's isolation was over. The war was just beginning.
We've had our disappointments in the past, hanging on for years, hoping they'll pull through, and then they don't. Nice thing about Ender, he's determined to ice within the first 6 months.
Oh?
Don't you see what's going on here? He's stuck at the Giants drinking the mind game. Is the boy suicidal? You never mentioned it.
Everybody gets the Giants sometime.
But Ender won't leave it alone. Like Pinuel.
Everybody looks like Pinuel at one time or another, but he's the only one who killed himself. I don't think it had anything to do with the Giants' drink.
You're betting my life on that. And look what he's done with his launch group.
Wasn't his fault, you know.
I don't care. His fault or not, he's poisoning that group. They're supposed to bond, and right where he stands, there's a chasm a mile wide.
I don't plan to leave him there very long anyway.
Then you better plan again. That launch is sick, and he's the source of the disease. He stays till it's cured.
I was the source of the disease. I was isolating him, and it worked.
Give him time with the group to see what he does with it.
We don't have time.
Well, we don't have time to rush too fast with a kid who has as much chance of being a monster as a military genius.
Is this an order?
The recorder's on. It's always on. Your ass is covered. Go to hell.
If it's an order, then I'll...
It's an order. Hold him where he is until we see how he handles things in his launch group. Jesus, Graf, you give me ulcers.
You wouldn't have ulcers if you'd leave the school to me and take care of the fleet yourself.
The fleet is looking for a battle commander. There's nothing to take care of until you get me that.
They filed clumsily into the battle room like children in a swimming pool for the first time, clinging to the handholds along the side. Null gravity was frightening, disorienting. They soon found that things went better if they didn't use their feet at all. Worse, the suits were confining. It was harder to make precise movements since the suits bent just a bit slower, resisted a bit more than any clothing they had ever worn before. Ender gripped the handhold and flexed his knees. He noticed that, along with the sluggishness, the suit had an amplifying effect on movement. It was hard to get them started, but the suit's legs kept moving, and strongly, after his muscles had stopped. Give them a push this strong, and the suit pushes with twice the force. I'll be clumsy for a while. Better get started. So, still grasping the handhold, he pushed off strongly with his feet. Instantly, he flipped around, his feet flying over his head, and landed flat on his back against the wall. The rebound was stronger, it seemed, and his hands tore loose from the handhold. He flew across the battle room, tumbling over and over. For a sickening moment, he tried to retain his old up-and-down orientation, his body attempting to right itself, searching for the gravity that wasn't there. Then he forced himself to change his view. He was hurtling toward a wall that was down, and at once he had control of himself. He wasn't flying, he was falling. This was a dive. He could choose how he would hit the surface. I'm going too fast to catch a hold and stay, but I can soften the impact. I can fly off at an angle if I roll when I hit and use my feet. It didn't work at all the way he had planned. He went off at an angle, but it was not the one he had predicted, nor did he have time to consider. He hit another wall, this time too soon to have prepared for it. But quite accidentally, he discovered a way to use his feet to control the rebound angle. Now he was soaring across the room again toward the other boys who still clung to the wall. This time he had slowed enough to be able to grip a rung. He was at a crazy angle in relation to the other boys, but once again his orientation had changed, and as far as he could tell, they were all lying on the floor, not hanging on a wall, and he was no more upside down than they were. "What are you trying to do? Kill yourself?" asked Shen. "Try it," Ender said. "The suit keeps you from hurting yourself, and you can control your bouncing with your legs, like this." He approximated the movement he had made. Shen shook his head. He wasn't trying any fool stunt like that. But one boy did take off, not as fast as Ender had, because he didn't begin with a flip, but fast enough. Ender didn't even have to see his face to know that it was Bernard, and right after him, Bernard's best friend, Alai. Ender watched them cross the huge room, Bernard struggling to orient himself to the direction he thought of as the floor, Alai surrendering to the movement and preparing to rebound from the wall. No wonder Bernard broke his arm in the shuttle, Ender thought. He tightens up when he's flying. He panics. Ender stored the information away for future reference. And another bit of information, too. Alai did not push off in the same direction as Bernard. He aimed for a corner of the room. Their paths diverged more and more as they flew, and where Bernard made a clumsy, crunching landing and bounce on his wall, Alai did a glancing triple bounce on 3 surfaces near the corner that left him most of his speed and sent him flying off at a surprising angle. Alai shouted and whooped, and so did the boys watching him. Some of them forgot they were weightless and let go of the wall to clap their hands. Now they drifted lazily in many directions, waving their arms, trying to swim. Now that's a problem, thought Ender. What if you catch yourself drifting? There's no way to push off. He was tempted to set himself adrift and try to solve the problem by trial and error, but he could see the others, their useless efforts at control, and he couldn't think of what he would do that they weren't already doing. Holding on to the floor with one hand, he fiddled idly with the toy gun that was attached to his suit in front, just below the shoulder. Then he remembered the hand rockets sometimes used by Marines when they did a boarding assault on an enemy station. He pulled the gun from his suit and examined it. He had pushed all the buttons back in the room, but the gun did nothing there. Maybe here in the battle room it would work. There were no instructions on it, no labels on the controls. The trigger was obvious. He had had toy guns, as all children had, almost since infancy. There were 2 buttons that his thumb could easily reach, and several others along the bottom of the shaft that were almost inaccessible without using 2 hands. Obviously, the 2 buttons near his thumb were meant to be instantly usable. He aimed the gun at the floor and pulled back on the trigger. He felt the gun grow instantly warm. Then he let go of the trigger. It cooled at once. Also, a tiny circle of light appeared on the floor where he was aiming. He thumbed the red button at the top of the gun and pulled the trigger again. Same thing. Then he pushed the white button. It gave a bright flash of light that illuminated a wide area, but not as intensely. The gun was quite cold when the button was pressed. The red button makes it like a laser, but it is not a laser, Dap had said, while the white button makes it a lamp. Neither will be much help when it comes to maneuvering. So everything depends on how you push off, the course you set when you start. It means we're going to have to get very good at controlling our launches and rebounds, or we're all going to end up floating around in the middle of nowhere. Ender looked around the room. A few of the boys were drifting close to walls now, flailing their arms to catch a handhold. Most were bumping into each other and laughing. Some were holding hands and going around in circles. Only a few, like Ender, were calmly holding on to the walls and watching. One of them, he saw, was Alai. He had ended up on another wall not too far from Ender. On impulse, Ender pushed off and moved quickly toward Alai. Once in the air, he wondered what he would say. Alai was Bernard's friend. What did Ender have to say to him? Still, there was no changing course now, so he watched straight ahead and practiced making tiny leg and hand movements to control which way he was facing as he drifted. Too late, he realized that he had aimed too well. He was not going to land near Alai, he was going to hit him. "Here, snag my hand," Alai called. Ender held out his hand. Alai took the shock of impact and helped Ender make a fairly gentle landing against the wall. "That's good," Ender said. "We ought to practice that kind of thing." "That's what I thought, only everybody's turning to butter out there," Alai said. "What happens if we get out there together? We should be able to shove each other in opposite directions." "Yeah? Okay?" It was an admission that all might not be right between them. Is it okay for us to do something together? Ender's answer was to take Alai by the wrist and get ready to push off. "Ready?" said Alai. "Go." Since they pushed off with different amounts of force, they began to circle each other. Ender made some small hand movements, then shifted a leg. They slowed. He did it again. They stopped orbiting. Now they were drifting evenly. "Packed head, Ender," Eli said. It was high praise. "Let's push off before we run into that bunch. And then let's meet over in that corner." Ender did not want this bridge into the enemy's camp to fail. "Last one there saves farts in a milk bottle," Eli said. Then, slowly, steadily, they maneuvered until they faced each other, spread-eagled, hand to hand, knee to knee. "And then we just scrunch?" asked Eli. "I've never done this before either," said Ender. They pushed off. It propelled them faster than they expected. Ender ran into a couple of boys and ended up on a wall that he hadn't expected. It took him a moment to reorient and find the corner where he and Eli were to meet. Eli was already headed toward it. Ender plotted a course that would include 2 rebounds to avoid the largest clusters of boys. When Ender reached the corner, Eli had hooked his arms through 2 adjacent handholds and was pretending to doze. "You win." "I want to see your fart collection," Eli said. "I stored it in your locker, didn't you notice? I thought it was my socks. We don't wear socks anymore." "Oh, yeah." A reminder that they were both far from home. It took some of the fun out of having mastered a bit of navigation. Ender took his pistol and demonstrated what he had learned about the 2 thumb buttons. "What does it do when you aim at a person?" asked Eli. "I don't know." "Why don't we find out?" Ender shook his head. "We might hurt somebody." "I meant, why don't we shoot each other in the foot or something? I'm not Bernard. I never tortured cats for fun." "Oh." "Can't be too dangerous or they wouldn't give these guns to kids." "Well, we're soldiers now." "Shoot me in the foot." "No, you shoot me." "Let's shoot each other." They did. Immediately Ender felt the leg of the suit grow stiff, immobile at the knee and ankle joints. "You frozen?" asked Eli. "Stiff as a board." "Let's freeze a few," Eli said. "Let's have our first war, us against them." They grinned. Then Ender said, "Better invite Bernard." Eli cocked an eyebrow. "Oh?" "And Shen." "That little butt-wiggler?" Ender decided that Eli was joking. Eli grinned. "Let's go get Bernard and Shen and freeze these bugger lovers." In 20 minutes, everyone in the room was frozen except Ender, Bernard, Shen, and Eli. The 4 of them sat there whooping and laughing until Dap came in. "I see you've learned how to use your equipment," he said. Then he did something to a control he held in his hand. Everybody drifted slowly toward the wall he was standing on. He went among the frozen boys, touching them and thawing their suits. There was a tumult of complaint that it wasn't fair how Bernard and Eli had shot them all when they weren't ready. "Well, why weren't you ready?" asked Dap. "You had your suits just as long as they did. You had just as many minutes flapping around like drunken ducks. Stop moaning and we'll begin." Ender noticed that it was assumed that Bernard and Eli were the leaders of the battle. Well, that was fine. Bernard knew that Ender and Eli had learned to use the guns together, and Ender and Eli were friends. Now others might believe that Ender had joined his group, but it wasn't so. Ender had joined a new group, Eli's group. Bernard had joined it too. It wasn't obvious to everyone. Bernard still blustered and sent his cronies on errands, but Eli now moved freely through the whole room, and when Bernard was crazy, Eli could joke a little and calm him down. When it came time to choose their launch leader, Eli was the almost unanimous choice. Bernard sulked for a few days, and then he was fine, and everyone settled into the new pattern. The launch was no longer divided into Bernard's in-group and Ender's outcasts. Eli was the bridge. Ender sat on his bed with his desk on his knees. It was private study time, and Ender was doing free play. It was a shifting, crazy kind of game in which the school computer kept bringing up new things, building a maze that you could explore. You could go back to events that you liked for a while. If you left one alone too long, it disappeared and something else took its place. Sometimes there were funny things, sometimes exciting ones, and he had to be quick to stay alive. He had lots of deaths, but that was okay. Games were like that. You died a lot until you got the hang of it. His figure on the screen had started out as a little boy. For a while it had changed into a bear. Now it was a large mouse with long and delicate hands. He ran his figure under a lot of large items of furniture depicted on the screen. He had played with the cat a lot, but now it was boring, too easy to dodge. He knew all the furniture. Not through the mouse hole this time, he told himself. I'm sick of the giant. It's a dumb game and I can't ever win. Whatever I choose is wrong. But he went through the mouse hole anyway and over the small bridge in the garden. He avoided the ducks and the dive-bombing mosquitoes. He had tried playing with them, but they were too easy, and if he played with the ducks too long, he turned into a fish, which he didn't like. Being a fish reminded him too much of being frozen in the battle room, his whole body rigid, waiting for the practice to end, so Dap would thaw him. So, as usual, he found himself going up the rolling hills. The landslides began. At first he had got caught again and again, crushed in an exaggerated blot of gore oozing out from under a rock pile. Now, though, he had mastered the skill of running up the slopes at an angle to avoid the crush, always seeking higher ground. And, as always, the landslides finally stopped being jumbles of rock. The face of the hill broke open, and instead of shale, it was white bread, puffy, rising like dough as the crust broke away and fell. It was soft and spongy. His figure moved more slowly, and when he jumped down off the bread, he was standing on a table. Giant loaf of bread behind him, giant stick of butter beside him, and the giant himself leaning his chin in his hands, looking at him. Ender's figure was about as tall as the giant's head from chin to brow. "I think I'll bite your head off," said the giant, as he always did. This time, instead of running away or standing there, Ender walked his figure up to the giant's face and kicked him in the chin. The giant stuck out his tongue, and Ender fell to the ground. "How about a guessing game?" asked the giant. So it didn't make any difference. The giant only played the guessing game. Stupid computer. Millions of possible scenarios in its memory, and the giant could only play one stupid game. The giant, as always, set 2 huge shot glasses, as tall as Ender's knees, on the table in front of him. As always, the 2 were filled with different liquids. The computer was good enough that the liquids had never repeated, not that he could remember. This time the one had a thick, creamy-looking liquid, the other hissed and foamed. "One is poison and one is not," said the giant. "Guess right, and I'll take you into fairyland." Guessing meant sticking his head into one of the glasses to drink. He never guessed right. Sometimes his head was dissolved. Sometimes he caught on fire. Sometimes he fell in and drowned. Sometimes he fell out, turned green, and rotted away. It was always ghastly, and the giant always laughed. Ender knew that whatever he chose, he would die. The game was rigged. On the first death, his figure would reappear on the giant's table to play again. On the second death, he'd come back to the landslides. Then to the garden bridge, then to the mouse hole, and then, if he still went back to the giant and played again and died again, his desk would go dark. Free Play Over would march around the desk, and Ender would lie back on his bed and tremble until he could finally go to sleep. The game was rigged, but still the giant talked about fairyland, some stupid, childish 3-year-old's fairyland that probably had some stupid Mother Goose or Pac-Man or Peter Pan, wasn't even worth getting into, but he had to find some way of beating the giant to get there. He drank the creamy liquid. Immediately he began to inflate and rise like a balloon. The giant laughed. He was dead again. He played again, and this time the liquid set like concrete and held his head down while the giant cut him open along the spine, deboned him like a fish, and began to eat while his arms and legs quivered. He reappeared at the landslides and decided not to go on. He even let the landslides cover him once, but even though he was sweating and he felt cold, with his next life he went back up the hills till they turned into bread and stood on the giant's table as the shot glasses were set before him. He stared at the 2 liquids, the one foaming, the other with waves in it like the sea. He tried to guess what kind of death each one held. Probably a fish would come out of the ocean one and eat me. The foamy one will probably asphyxiate me. I hate this game. It isn't fair. It's stupid. It's rotten. And instead of pushing his face into one of the liquids, he kicked one over, then the other, and dodged the giant's huge hands as the giant shouted, "Cheater! Cheater!" He jumped at the giant's face, clambered up his lip and nose, and began to dig in the giant's eye. The stuff came away like cottage cheese, and as the giant screamed, Ender's figure burrowed into the eye, climbed right in, burrowed in and in. The giant fell over backward. The view shifted as he fell, and when the giant came to rest on the ground, there were intricate, lacy trees all around. A bat flew up and landed on the dead giant's nose. Ender brought his figure up out of the giant's eye.
"How did you get here?" the bat asked. "Nobody ever comes here."
Ender could not answer, of course. So he reached down, took a handful of the giant's eye stuff, and offered it to the bat. The bat took it and flew off, shouting as it went, "Welcome to Fairyland." He had made it. He ought to explore. He ought to climb down from the giant's face and see what he had finally achieved. Instead, he signed off, put his desk in his locker, stripped off his clothes, and pulled his blanket over him. This was supposed to be a game, not a choice between his own grisly death and an even worse murder. I'm a murderer even when I play. Peter would be proud of me.
Isn't it nice to know that Ender can do the impossible?
The players' deaths have always been sickening. I've always thought the giant's drink was the most perverted part of the whole mind game, but going for the eye like that, this is one we want to put in command of our fleet?
What matters is that he won the game that couldn't be won.
I suppose you'll move him now.
We were waiting to see how he handled the thing with Bernard. He handled it perfectly.
So as soon as he can cope with a situation, you move him to one he can't cope with. Doesn't he get any rest?
He'll have a month or 2, maybe 3 with his launch group. That's really quite a long time in a child's life.
Does it ever seem to you that these boys aren't children? I look at what they do, the way they talk, and they don't seem like little kids.
They're the most brilliant children in the world, each in his own way.
Yeah, but shouldn't they still act like children? I mean, they aren't normal. They act like history. Napoleon, Wellington, Caesar, and Brutus.
We're trying to save the world, not heal the wounded heart. You're too compassionate.
General Levy has no pity for anyone. All the videos say so. But don't hurt this boy.
Are you joking?
I mean, don't hurt him more than you have to.
Alai sat across from Ender at dinner. I finally figured out how you sent that message using Bernard's name. Me? Asked Ender. Come on, who else? Sure wasn't Bernard, and Shen isn't too hot on the computer, and I know it wasn't me. Who else? Doesn't matter. I figured out how to fake a new student entry. You just created a student named Bernard Blank, B-E-R-N-A-R-D space, so the computer didn't kick it out as a repeat of another student. Sounds like that might work, said Ender. Okay, it does work, but you did that practically on the first day. Or somebody, maybe Dap did it to keep Bernard from getting too much control. I found something else. I can't do it with your name. Oh? Anything with Ender in it gets kicked out. I can't get inside your files at all either. You made your own security system. Maybe. Alai grinned. I just got in and trashed somebody's files. He's right behind me. I'm cracking the system. I need protection, Ender. I need your system. If I gave you my system, you'll know how I do it, and you'll get in and trash me. You say me? Alai asked. I the sweetest friend you got. Ender laughed. I'll set up a system for you. Now? Can I finish eating? You never finish eating. It was true. Ender's tray always had food on it after a meal. Ender looked at the plate and decided he was through. Let's go then. When they got to the barracks, Ender squatted down by his bed and said, Get your desk and bring it over here. I'll show you how. But when Alai brought his desk to Ender's bed, Ender was just sitting there, his lockers still closed. What's up? Asked Alai. In answer, Ender palmed his locker. Unauthorized access attempt, it said. It didn't open. Somebody done a dance on your head, Mama, Alai said. Somebody eated your face. You sure you want my security system now? Ender got up and walked away from his bed. Ender, said Eli. Ender turned around. Eli was holding a little piece of paper. What is it? Eli looked up at him. Don't you know? This was on your bed. You must have sat on it. Ender took it from him. Ender Wiggin, assigned Salamander Army, Commander Bonzo Madrid. Effective immediately. Code green-green-brown. No possessions transferred. You're smart, Ender, but you don't do the battle room any better than me. Ender shook his head. It was the stupidest thing he could think of, to promote him now. Nobody got promoted before they were 8 years old. Ender wasn't even 7 yet. And launchies usually moved into the armies together, with most armies getting a new kid at the same time. There were no transfer slips on any of the other beds. Just when things were finally coming together, just when Bernard was getting along with everybody, even Ender, just when Ender was beginning to make a real friend out of Eli, just when his life was finally getting livable. Ender reached down to pull Eli up from the bed. Salamander Army's in contention anyway, Eli said. Ender was so angry at the unfairness of the transfer that tears were coming to his eyes. Mustn't cry, he told himself. Eli saw the tears but had the grace not to say so. Well, they're fartheads, Ender. They won't even let you take anything you own. Ender grinned and didn't cry after all. Think I should strip and go naked? Eli laughed, too. On impulse, Ender hugged him, tight, almost as if he were Valentine. He even thought of Valentine then and wanted to go home. I don't want to go, he said. Eli hugged him back. I understand them, Ender. You are the best of us. Maybe they in a hurry to teach you everything. They don't want to teach me everything, Ender said. I wanted to learn what it was like to have a friend. Eli nodded soberly. Always my friend. Always the best of my friends, he said. Then he grinned. Go slice up the buggers. Yeah, Ender smiled back. Eli suddenly kissed Ender on the cheek and whispered in his ear, Salam. Then, red-faced, he turned away and walked to his own bed at the back of the barracks. Ender guessed that the kiss and the word were somehow forbidden, a suppressed religion perhaps, or maybe the word had some private and powerful meaning for Eli alone. Whatever it meant to Eli, Ender knew that it was sacred, that he had uncovered himself for Ender as once Ender's mother had done when he was very young, before they put the monitor in his neck, and she had put her hands on his head when she thought he was asleep and prayed over him. Ender had never spoken of that to anyone, not even to Mother, but had kept it as a memory of holiness, of how his mother loved him when she thought that no one, not even he, could see or hear. That was what Eli had given him, a gift so sacred that even Ender could not be allowed to understand what it meant. After such a thing, nothing could be said. Eli reached his bed and turned around to see Ender, their eyes held for only a moment, locked in understanding. Then Ender left. There would be no green-green-brown in this part of the school. He would have to pick up the colors in one of the public areas. The others would be finished with dinner very soon. He didn't want to go near the mess hall. The game room would be nearly empty. None of the games appealed to him the way he felt now, so he went to the bank of public desks at the back of the room and signed on to his own private game. He went quickly to Fairyland. The giant was dead when he arrived now. He had to climb carefully down the table, jump to the leg of the giant's overturned chair, and then make the drop to the ground. For a while there had been rats gnawing at the giant's body, but Ender had killed one with a pin from the giant's ragged shirt, and they had left him alone after that. The giant's corpse had essentially finished its decay. What could be torn by the small scavengers was torn. The maggots had done their work on the organs. Now it was a desiccated mummy, hollowed out, teeth in a rigid grin, eyes empty, fingers curled. Ender remembered burrowing through the eye when it had been alive and malicious and intelligent. Angry and frustrated as he was, Ender wished to do such violence again. But the giant had become part of the landscape now, and so there could be no rage against him. Ender had always gone over the bridge to the castle of the Queen of Hearts, where there were games enough for him, but none of those appealed to him now. He went around the giant's corpse and followed the brook upstream to where it emerged from the forest. There was a playground there, slides and monkey bars, teeter-totters and merry-go-rounds. with a dozen children laughing as they played.